Hey, come see us live. We're doing our Rumble Time show September 27th in Los Angeles. We'll be in Tempe, Arizona, and we'll be in Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets. So here's Bobby Kennedy, and he's on a Full Send podcast, and here's what he said about Donald Trump and how his second term will be different from his first term.
Trump, I think, tried to do that the last time to drain the swamp. And he was well-intentioned, but he didn't know how to do it. And he said that to me. He said, I didn't know anything about governing. And he said, we won this election, and then all of a sudden, you got to fill 60,000 jobs or something like that. And he said, I was surrounded by people, by lobbyists and business interests who were saying, you got to appoint this guy, you got to appoint that guy, and that's what he did. And he brought in Scott Gottlieb, who was a Pfizer business partner, to run the FDA. Gottlieb did a $100 billion favor for Pfizer, and then what did he do? He went back to join Pfizer's board with all the stock, dividends that he got. Shit. So it's just a payoff, a revolving door payoff. And they brought in a telecommunications lobbyist to run FCC. They brought in oil lobbyist Ryan Zinke to run the Department of Interior, a coal lobbyist to run the EPA, another pharmaceutical lobbyist, Alex Azar, to run HHS. So you go across the board, and all of these agencies were being run, and that's what they all do. That's what they all do. And Trump, the last time, got locked into that, and he told me, I don't want to do that again. He said, those were bad guys, and this time we're going to do something different. And he said, last time he brought John Bolton in to run NSA, and he's now understands who the neocons are and and he's anti-war. He wants to end the wars. And he did a pretty good job this last time. There was no, U.S. Combat test during his administration, but I think that he wants to leave a legacy. He's not going to run again. He's a lame duck president. And he wants to do something that's good for this country. And I can help him do that because I have sued all these agencies. I've sued FDA, CDC, NIH. I've sued the FCC. I just won a big case against the FCC in the Court of Appeals for lying to the American public about the dangers of cell phone radiation. And now they have to redo all of those regulations. I've sued the USDA, the Department of Agriculture, and most of the big agricultural producers. And when you sue these companies, when you sue these agencies, you get a PhD in how corporate capture works and how to unravel it. And I know how to do that, and he's asked me to help him do that. So, if we do that, if he does what he says, I'm very optimistic that we can actually remedy a lot of this corruption.
There are plenty of people saying underneath this video that you're a fool if you believe what RFK is saying, that it's all theater, and that him and Trump are con men. So basically, we have a choice of one campaign that is saying these things that we haven't heard a campaign say in my entire lifetime, besides Bernie Sanders. And if they follow through on this, it'll be truly revolutionary. Or we have the other campaign, which isn't even saying any of these things, and is in fact promising the opposite. So what gives this a level, again, I'll be writing in Dave Chappelle, but what gives what he's saying a level of authenticity is that Bobby Kennedy did not have to do what he did over the last 10 to 15 years, taking on big pharma and blowing the whistle about the information he found out about vaccines. He was already a highly successful environmental lawyer with an impressive winning record, and was held in very, very high esteem and was respected by everybody except corrupt corporate criminals. He didn't get rich doing that. He didn't get rich going against big pharma over the last 10 or 15 years. So he certainly didn't do that for the money. He wasn't doing it for any kind of personal gain because he lost everything doing it. He lost his personal reputation, his business. He lost lots of his family. Yet he still does it to this day. And he turned out to be 1,000% correct about COVID, something almost no one gives him credit for. What I think is more important, and I said this before and I'll say it again, is even if you think this is some kind of bizarre long con that RFK Jr. is playing in some craven attempt to grab power at the end of his life. He's 70 years old. What cannot be ignored and what should not be ignored is that half the country is now supporting the things he's saying. I remember when the other half of the country used to support the things that RFK Jr. is currently saying. Imagine if those two parts of the country got together and worked on these ideas that they had in common. Imagine that. That's what they don't want you to do. That's the only threat to the establishment. If the populist left and the populist right realize that we agree on stuff and come together to oppose the oligarchy, that's the only thing that scares them, because that's the only thing that could be a threat to them. And that's how they keep us divided. So I want my editors to put that part on the front end, and then I throw it to Mike Benz, and I ask him if he thinks they're sincere. I will tell you this, everybody I know who I respect thinks that Bobby Kennedy is sincere and genuine. Everybody I know who I respect says that they think he's sincere and genuine. Whether Trump will follow through on it, we don't know. That remains to be seen. I think it's doubtful, but we'll see. We'll see if Bobby Kennedy is allowed to have influence in the administration. I don't think none of it's going to matter, because I think the deep state will stop Donald Trump from becoming president, just like they would stop Bernie Sanders, Cornel West, Jill Stein, or anybody else. I don't think we're going to have to worry, or that question's not going to get answered, because they're going to stop him from being president. And so would you agree with, let me finish my thought from earlier that I lost, which was my friend Russell Dobular, who says if Donald Trump is allowed to be elected president again, he will have to rethink everything he thought about the CIA and the deep state, because they're not as powerful as he thought they are. Now, I don't think that Donald Trump will be allowed to be president. I had a Harvard professor on my show yesterday or the day before who has found out that Google, which we all know works as a defense contractor, CIA, all that stuff, and works hand in hand with the deep state, if they aren't it themselves. They are rigging their algorithms, according to Dr. Epstein, to swing between 6 million and 25 million votes. And he says in his analysis, there's absolutely no way that Donald Trump can win the election based on what Google is doing. And he's figured it out scientifically with data that they can swing votes. And it's not votes like people of me or you. It's the people who are the undecided, which is mind-blowing to me that you could be undecided. So would you agree with Russell Dobular that there's no way that the deep state will allow Donald Trump or a populist at all to become president of the United States ever again?
Well, Google was created by the deep state, if you will, the blob, the foreign policy blob. Back before, 2 years before Google was founded, it was a PhD project of Larry Page and Sergey Brin when they were at Stanford, and that project was funded by a DARPA grant. That DARPA grant was a joint CIA-NSA program in order to use the aggregated search engine results to track birds of a feather flocking together online, so that the CIA and NSA would have a political radar system for the use of the early internet by foreign political groups or dissident groups that the CIA wanted to back when they were using Web 1.0 and forums and static web pages before social media. And then using that joint CIA NSA program DARPA grant funds, they developed the back page, back rub engine, and then turned that into Google 2 years later. The first year Google went public, it became a military contractor. And remember, many core Google services are only possible because of the CIA or the Pentagon. Google Maps, for example, was because Google bought the CIA's keyhole satellite technology. So, there's been this relationship between Google and the CIA, Google and our foreign policy establishment since literally before it was born. While it was in the process of getting pregnant. So, but getting back to this. Google does have a small degree of independence, but that gets negotiated by the blob weighing down on it. So how, I just was talking about the National Endowment for Democracy,
yes,
this CIA cutout with its board being all these international corporations and banks. Well, in early 2017, the National Endowment for Democracy, as well as Michael Chertoff, who was the first head of DHS and is this, you know, he was also the chairman of BAE Systems, which is the largest military contractor in all of NATO. It's the UK's equivalent of Raytheon, Boeing, and Lockheed combined. So, you know, so he and the National Endowment for Democracy research head held a conference where they cornered basically the heads of Google and Facebook's content moderation teams at the time for Central and Eastern Europe, because that was where this whole everything from Germany to Ukraine was this big political hot zone after Crimea in 2014. So Donald Trump had just gotten elected. This is early 2017. They get together in a smoky room like the one we just described, and I just posted at the top of my feed if folks are interested on X, in Bratislava, Slovakia. And so this guy who's basically representing the CIA's #1 cutout, and the guy who's the head of the largest military contractor in NATO, get together the Google censorship policy head and the Facebook censorship policy head for those regions. And the caption ahead of the video frames the issue as being unfiltered alternative news is what gave rise to the Democratic threats of Brexit and Donald Trump. They literally play before the panel starts this big Hollywood propaganda, you know, sort of motion picture film where it shows you know, the rise of media, and it was really good. But then there were JFK assassination conspiracy theories, so things got bad, and then Brexit happened and the music gets really dark, and then Trump gets elected, the music starts blaring, it blends to red, and then the next picture is Adolf Hitler. Okay, so this is literally the sharp fangs of the CIA and the Pentagon, and they're saying this is the end of the liberal rules-based international order, because after Brexit, we're going to Frexit in France, Italexit in Italy, Brexit in Greece, Grexit in Germany, Spexit in Spain. The whole EU is going to come undone. NATO is going to come undone. So there's no enforcement arm for the IMF. The world is over because people are allowed to shitpost on the internet. This is what the context of this meeting was. But the enemy that they declared, and I'm not hyperbolic when I say this, there's a direct quote, and I'll post this on my X account as well, is unfiltered alternative news. Because unfiltered alternative news, research shows, this is what they said, research shows unfiltered alternative news is a font for populism. Populism is the will of the people expressing itself against the democratic institutions. We need to redefine democracy from being the will of the people to the will of these institutions who present the sort of bumper cars on the bowling lane of democracy. And so basically you have the CIA and NATO telling the heads of Google and Facebook censorship teams, you need to stop allowing populist speech, because it's going to be the end of the world, and you better do it because this is a matter of national security.
And that's what leads us to the censorious world we're living in. And are you surprised that half the country goes along with it? How easily the Democrats are manipulated because they're told what they're fighting. Hitler from 1933, instead of what they are fighting is a TV game show host, real estate magnate. That's really what they're fighting. A guy who was friends with everybody in the establishment. Loved Donald Trump up until he won that election. They gave him his own national television show for 10 years. They all golfed together. They all went to each other's third and fourth weddings. Their kids are all best friends with each other. He was allowed to guest host Saturday Night Live. And then all of a sudden
he was donating to Democrats.
He was donating to Democrats, exactly. So, can you answer my friend? So, if Donald Trump is allowed to, so do you think that they will allow him to be elected again? Because I don't think they will. I think this is all theater, that we have a democracy, and that the deep state is no way in hell. I mean, they've gone through, look at all the ways they've tried to rig the election already. Russiagate was a chance to try to rig the election, right? Then they impeached him twice. That was a chance. That was a way to try to rig the next election. Then that January 6th, which I'm going to talk about in just a second, that was a way to criminalize Donald Trump and his followers.
Made him with 91 felonies.
And then after that, they then hit him with 91 felonies and 4 bogus. We've never prosecuted a ex-president president in the history of our country, even ones that we know committed war crimes and ordered torture programs. And Barack Obama didn't prosecute George Bush for the torture program because he said all those torture crimes happened in the past. And Barack Obama's looking towards the future. And I'm glad we're not prosecuting past crimes anymore, because that's where I've committed all my crimes too. But so they
didn't even bring those prosecutions until Trump announced he was going to run again.
That's
they
exactly,
didn't bring them until 2023.
That's exactly right. So do you think that, I mean, that's just, these are all ways that the establishment is trying to rig this election, and people like Jon Stewart go and Bill Maher go right along with it. What do you think? Do you think that they're going to allow him to become president?
Well, on the first question about whether or not, I'm surprised that so many people go along with it. I think both of us, Jimmy, after seeing how people reacted to COVID, I will never again be surprised by the ability of people to go along, to get along, for as long as I live. Ask me that question 40 years from now, and I'll say I ain't surprised after seeing that. But the fact is I do think that in terms of half the country supporting censorship, these are loose beliefs, loosely held, or strong beliefs, loosely held. I don't think these are actually strongly held beliefs. I think this is something that is under the kind of temporary mania of the huge amount of media muscle that's poured into posing mis and disinformation as a threat to democracy, mis and disinformation as this grave social ill. It's sort of our Delta variant in the sense that free speech still plays a very, very significant role in U.S. statecraft. The very blob creatures who are pro-censorship in America are the first people to pass sanctions on Iran or North Korea or Venezuela if they engage in acts of censorship. So they do need to maintain this kind of strategic schizophrenia about it. But I think that if the money for that propaganda apparatus drops away, you will see the people organically sort of revert back to being generally pro-free speech, even if there are some frills or residual hangups about it from frankly the psychological operation that's been done with this whole new creation of this field of disinformation studies and this new sort of professorial class of fake academics who present research about the disinformation's threat to democracy posed by people doing fitness videos on YouTube. But in terms of the 2024,
can I just say it's funny that the disinformation specialists, they never have a report about all the disinformation coming from the government. Isn't that wild? It's never the government that's the lie. And we all know the biggest liars and biggest disinformers are the government. Second is the corporate media. And third, a distant third, are randos on YouTube and social media. But anyway, go ahead, back to the 2020.
That's because they're funded by the government.
That's right.
Almost all of them are funded by the government. They are the blob's mercenary arm. They are the sort of arms of the octopus, not the brain of it. The National Science Foundation has given over $100 million during the Biden administration to a web of over 60 U.S. universities, all getting money to do full-time 24/7 internet censorship work. The Pentagon has spent tens of millions of dollars funding this. DHS has spent tens of millions of dollars funding this. The FBI and DOJ even have counter misinformation programs. HHS, FDA, CDC all have their own misinformation programs that fund the university disinfo labs, that fund the fact-checking organizations. Pointer and the International Fact-Checking Network, the big umbrella group for all these fact-checkers, has something like 30 different government grants just from the State Department alone. This is a way to get godlike control over the internal political ecosystem of every country on earth. So not only is the State Department and the CIA cutout web, like the National Endowment for Democracy and USAID, funding this at home, they are funding it all around the world because it's a way to rig who rises and falls in Nigeria, who rises and falls in Nicaragua, who rises and falls in India. And it has become an instrument of statecraft. It's now a tool of our diplomacy toolkit that we used to only have for free speech. Now, it was cynical and self-serving, but I do believe that it is noble in the sense that free speech was a big part of State Department diplomacy. We would pressure foreign counterparts to free their media so that it would be a free and independent media ecosystem free from government control. And this would allow our CIA media like Voice of America and Radio for Europe to penetrate the region. It would allow our CIA-backed dissident groups to be able to rise in political power because the state would not be able to suppress them. But that's how we would use sanctions. We just 2 years ago, we passed sanctions on Iran for its government daring to censor, the revolutionaries during the summer there. 3.5 years ago, we passed sanctions on North Korea for the government censoring journalists there. We do this. This is stock and trade. Now we're doing the opposite. Now we're effectively conditioning humanitarian support. It's soft power projection, but on democratic reforms around digital resilience, meaning setting up the censorship infrastructure and allowing the CIA's censorship army to swarm into the region. This is what happened in Brazil. This is what happened in the EU. We have formal government programs at state to do this and only this. USAID has the Democracy, Human Rights, and Governance program, which that's $50 billion USAID has. And they are spending hundreds of millions of that on full-time censorship work to coerce foreign countries. In their own documents, they even have advisories on what to do if a country is resisting setting up censorship infrastructure. And they pitch their foreign counterparts, well, listen, if you don't have the legal ability to do this at home, or you don't have the political support, simply call it something else. Don't call it counter disinformation. Call it strategic communications. Call it media literacy. You have a public relations capacity as your election court in Brazil, the TSE. Simply hitch it onto that. Instead of calling it public relations, call it strategic communications. And we'll fold the program under that. They basically not only are committing the censorship crime all around the world, the U.S. State Department is, they are literally coaching all of the co-conspirators on how to orchestrate the cover-up.
Hey, do you get stressed because your monthly income just doesn't seem to cover the bills anymore? Well, you're not alone. Most Americans feel this way every day. Everything is still ridiculously expensive, and we're all reaching more and more for the credit cards to cover the basics like childcare, insurance, power, and food. It's tough. If you're feeling this way, you need to call our friends over at American Financing. They're helping hardworking Americans just like you tap into their home's equity to pay off their high interest debt and even create some additional savings to be ready for whatever life throws your way. With interest rates dropping, a company like American Financing that never charges upfront or hidden fees is the perfect partner to help you get into a better financial position. Their salary-based mortgage consultants are saving homeowners over $800 a month on average. Waiting is not an option. Call today. You may delay 2 mortgage payments. Call 888-804-0303. That's 888-804-0303 or visit AmericanFinancing.net/Jimmy. Hey, come see us live. We're doing our Rumble Time show September 27th in Los Angeles. We'll be in Tempe, Arizona, and we'll be in Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.